This is a 5 on your side local news update.
Okay, our political reporter Mark Maxwell has been in court all morning for the Alfred Montgomery trial. Just started. Give us a lowdown on what's happening here.
Yeah, hey, Paul. Our first big update during lunch break, day one of the trial of Sheriff Alfred Montgomery. First, let's just set the stage for what you see when you go into the courtroom. Interesting look. Sheriff Alfred Montgomery in handcuffs. His right hand is unshackled, free to write notes to his attorney. His left hand shackled to a chain around his waist. Both of his feet shackled together, and behind him, 2 U.S. Marshals. That in itself, a jarring image of this question over the conflict between justice, power, and the administration of that justice. It was a really interesting sight in the courtroom, Paul, this morning, where you saw the opening statements take place. But in that courtroom as well, as you see Alfred Montgomery there, he's not just fighting to keep his badge and his job, but in the back of the courtroom, Federal Prosecutor Christine Krug carefully watching, taking notes. So it's really interesting to see just the image of what's happening here. And a retired judge who used to work in that same room, Judge David Mason, now his defense attorney, who, by the way, spent a lot of his career in the Missouri Department of Corrections, knows the jail and the prison system inside and out. So really fascinating, just kind of the background coming into this big moment.
A very big moment. And we know yesterday the defense was probably ready. You told us, but, Alfred Montgomery wasn't there. So the judge said, we're not going to do this. So
right, he couldn't get out of jail for that first day.
We know the judge has, some ground rules here that are being looked at. What are you seeing there?
Well, the judge has been careful all the way up until this point to say Alfred Montgomery does deserve his day in court. He does deserve due process. And so the judge has been careful to protect Montgomery's rights to defend himself up until this point. We should tell you, one of the reasons why I'm coming to you now during this lunch break is because the judge has other ground rules that apply to the media as well, Paul. For example, no live tweeting from inside the courtroom. They allowed cameras in briefly before the proceedings began just to spray the room. We could see the sheriff briefly taking his seat, being on his right hand being unshackled. But that's about it. Other than relaying notes to our newsroom, we're going to be confined to the courtroom, which judges are different. You have some younger judges who are a little more modern, a little more comfortable with social media, even allowing cameras in. This judge, Judge Omer, he's technically retired, back to oversee this case. He's a little more old school, and he just doesn't have that comfort level with cameras live streaming his courtroom.
At least you are in there, though, and you're seeing everything going on. Are you seeing witnesses? Are you seeing who's going to be involved?
Yeah, so the first witness called to the stand after opening statements. And I should say the state was very clear and direct in their opening statement. It was something to the effect of, Your Honor, at the end of this, you're going to see that any one of these 6 counts we've brought against the sheriff would result in his expulsion from office. We believe we're going to get all 6. They kept it pretty direct. David Mason, the judge, the defense attorney, he likes to talk. And he's a runaway train, man. He gets on there and he just starts going and going. A couple times, Judge Omer and even the state had to interject, object, keep it on track, stop arguing. This is not, just lay out your evidence, lay out your case. We'll get to closing arguments after all this evidence. So then Tammy Ross, the jail commissioner at the start of all this, she was put on the stand. The state asked her to describe that moment she was handcuffed on February 14th when the sheriff was barging into the jail demanding access to interrogate a defendant, a woman who was a prisoner of the jail. She had been sexually assaulted by a deputy. And the sheriff says, I got to talk to this woman. Tammy Ross says, well, I don't know if you're trying to tamper with this investigation, if you're trying to interfere with it. So she's like, I need help. The Montgomery's defense attorneys get up there and they start grilling her, cross-examining her about her background. Are you qualified to make these decisions? So it's really a struggle over who controls what part of the jail, who allows access for sheriff's deputies to get to that part. So right now we're in a bit of a break and a holding pattern, but there's been some really interesting back and forth over Tammy Ross, who she is, whether she was, keep in mind, the feds brought their first charge against Alfred Montgomery saying that the sheriff deprived her of her rights when he had her placed in handcuffs. So it's really going to be an interesting case. You see the Montgomery attorneys digging in at her. They really think that that's going to be the crux of this case. There are 5 other charges against Montgomery, but that one, the Tammy Ross handcuff incident, seems to be the center of this whole case.
You're watching this whole saga in front of you live. Tell me one more question. What can we take away from this right now, day one, Mark?
Well, the takeaways, I think, is pretty clear. The strategy of the defense attorneys is to say he crossed the line. He thought there was authority that belonged to him that just really didn't. Tammy Ross described her first interactions with the sheriff as someone who she perceived to be arrogant, someone who was kind of flouting his authority, and the Montgomery's defense attorney said, "You just didn't like him, did you?" They're trying to paint it as a personal grudge rather than a public official crossing a line he never should have crossed. So we'll see how the judge reads all this, but I think he's getting a little frustrated at how long they're taking to really depose Tammy Ross and cross-examine her here. This case could go well into next week, into Thanksgiving week. There are dozens of subpoenas for more witnesses, a lot of cross-examination to take place. So we're really just getting started, if you like. The last thing I'll say, Paul, on this is this. We've seen a number of students, law school students and other students come into the courtroom. I think a lot of people are fascinated in the legal world by this case because you have this sort of two tracks of prosecution going at once. There's a federal prosecution happening and the state pushing to expel a public official. Both of those things are interesting on their own, but the fact that they're happening in concurrent timelines and kind of like a little bit tangling with each other makes all of this really fascinating because one case, one tripwire, one moment on the witness stand could completely change the course of that other case. So there's a lot to watch for.
It will be studied. It really seems like that.
I think that's not an overstatement.
Yeah, and just to think about the handcuffs and, like you said, the chains. There is so much here. The chains on his ankles. I mean, what a picture! I'm glad you came on over here. I know you got to scoot and get back probably over there.
Yeah, we're going to get back in there. We hope to bring updates in the 4, 5, and 6 o'clock. If I'm not able to get out of the courtroom because they don't want us coming and going, so we'll have someone covering those developments in our 4 o'clock. I hope to be doing that at 5 and again at 6. But a lot to cover in the trial of Alfred Montgomery, and stay tuned. It probably will be keeping us busy in our newsroom for well into next week.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
This has been a 5 on Your Side local news update.